Hello, welcome back. Today I wanted to show you a game that I was found, quite inspiring actually. It was a game by Anand. It's going dating back to 1991. So when I first started getting into chess, I did go along to the PCL Intel Rapid Play. So just adjust that a little bit, which was in London. So they had PCL Intel Rapid Plays in I believe there was some in Paris, like where this took place, and I believe there was some in New York and Moscow. I think those were the venues. It was like London, New York, Moscow, possibly Paris as well. I'm not sure if this particular one was sponsored by Intel. I think the first one I went to was 1994, and the winner of that would have been Ivanchuk, I believe, the one in London. I think Anand uh, defeated a computer in the semi-finals. Does anyone got any memory of this? So this was called something like Pentium Genius, and it beat Kasparov in earlier matches. And I remember being in the audience. It was all out the back, and then I sort of said, you know, we were chatting. I was chatting to. I didn't really know anyone, right? I didn't know anyone in chess at that point, really. Or not many people. But I was chatting to and some. I said to some old lady. I said, "Yeah, I think the computer's going to beat Anand. It's beating Kasparov." But Anand won very nicely against the computer. He sort of like exposed its sort of lack of horizon, and in the final, he was playing Ivanchuk. Both were playing at incredibly high level, and I believe that. Um, I mean, Anand was just like a genius. He was so inspiring to me because he was just so quick, and it's just such a high level of natural talent. And but I remember watching that final against Ivanchuk. It was a famous game where Ivanchuk missed mate one, and I started laughing in the audience because I was sort of so nervous. It was like a nervous laughter, and I remember Ivanchuk, despite the fact that it was sort of dark and sort of audience, and there's all this kind of tension. He actually sort of shot me this kind of like evil look. Well, that's what I thought at the time. He lost that game on time, but then went on to win the match. Then the next year, Anand um, played Draev in the semi-finals. I think I eventually played Draev at some point later on in my career. Draev is like the same sort of generation as Anand, and he also won the World Junior Championship. Very famous player, basically. But Anand, I was just so amazed by his level of natural ability. I thought this guy's the most naturally talented player I've ever seen, and he actually lost on time because he basically tried to queen a pawn. And then rather than playing any random move, and he would have won on time, but he lost on time. So Dreyer played Mickey Adams in the final, and I remember having this conversation with the final, and I was convinced that Mickey Adams was going to win. This other guy was going. There was like a computer out in the lobby. You could go on the computer, and I can't remember what you could do on the computer, but I remember having this conversation. Or maybe you could play against the computer on the computer or something like that, or against a chess program, and everyone was probably losing to it, right? Even back in 1995. So, so I think Adams had done bad at the summer Hastings because I was there, and I remember he lost to Chris Ward, lost to Keith Arkle, didn't have a good event, but obviously with great players they bounced back, and he then qualified through the qualifier. I think got to the main event, got through to play Drayev. I'm not sure he beat in the semis. Might have been someone like Tony Miles. I remember he did beat Tony Miles. I remember he played Tony Miles in one of those matches, and he beat Tony Miles in a kind of like a sort of torre attack, and also a Pribble. There was a game in the Pribble he beat Tony Miles quite smoothly as white, and possibly won as black in a torre attack. That was what I remembered. And then in the final, he beat Dreyer very nicely. He just cleaned him up. I mean, it was really impressive. I thought this guy's also amazing. Because I think actually the previous year, in 1994, he'd lost to Anand in one of the earlier matches. So I watched a lot of these matches, really inspired by these people like this. That was when rapid play was really starting to become like a big thing. So this match, Anand Salov, Anand eventually won this match. So I think you normally play 2 games, right? Now, the surprise winner of this competition was, I believe it was, well, not a massive surprise, but Jan Timman, who was obviously a top player at that point, but he wasn't really noted for rapid play so much. In the early 90s, I think these people like Anand were starting to take over and really take over people like Timman's mantle. And so I think what happened was Timman won in the final against Garry Kasparov. But let's have a look at this Anand game, because it's really a sparring game. So we're going to go through the moves. So Anand was white. And at some point I'm going to pause the video and ask you what amazing move that Anand come up with that so impressed me. So Salov actually is known to be, so the idea White's doing here is really wants to go d4, because he can't do arrows on it. This is the chess 365chess.com site, by the way. I've done videos for them. Check out their website. It's a very good website. They've got lots of stuff on here. E5. So all this looks normal. I mean, Salov was number 3 in the world at one point, probably around about this period. He was very, very strong. He more or less quit chess, and nowadays he kind of is more well known for having these slightly crackpot theories. And I think he's kind of like a David Icke type. You may want to check out his website if you're into that sort of thing. I'm not particularly, but I think he's a bit of a controversial figure. Then again, a lot of Russian former chess players like Vladimir Kramnik are kind of similar. So e5. So the idea is, so now you're seeing the genius behind h3, and that's actually one of the typical moves in these kind of more anti-Sicilian, that you go h3 to stop the knight coming to g4. So black could have maybe considered bringing the knight back to e8, but he played knight d5. I didn't watch this game in the flesh, obviously. I only really, the only tournaments I went to see were in London. I also saw a famous match, Young England versus Young Hungary, and it was Judith Polgar was playing. She beat Michael Adams actually in one of those matches, I believe. I remember that actually. I also remember Sophia Polgar. Sophia Polgar was obviously playing. Susan Polgar was playing. I think it was just the 3 Polgar sisters, and the other players who were playing were Michael Adams, no, David Norwell was definitely one, but I can't remember who the other one was. If anyone could tell me, I assume that there were 3. It might have been someone like Stuart Conquest, but I mean the contenders were possibly Stuart Conquest, Willie Watson. He might have been out of it by then. Don't think it was David Norwood, but it might have been. Sorry, I said David Norwood. David Norwood was definitely one. Don't think it was Danny King, but it might have been. And it could have been Julian Hodgson. So if anyone knows that, please leave your comments down below. So Queen A5. So this is what really impressed me about this game was when I read about it. Was okay. So black takes the pawn, and black takes on e5. So this is the key position, and this is what Anand had obviously visualized earlier. So it's white to play. What would you play in this position? Pause your video. Hopefully I've covered the moves with a video camera. But it's possible you might be able to see the moves anyway. I don't know. So it's white to play and win, essentially. No, sorry. He starts off with this move, bishop h6. Right. Okay, so that's the first move. So So black could move the rook, but he decides, right, if I move the rook, I'm going to allow a move like queen f3 that's going to be very nasty. So if I play a move like rook e8 here, queen f3 looks natural because you're hitting f7. And if I go, for example, I play the move d5 blocking the bishop on b3, there's moves like queen f6, knight d7, queen g7 check, bishop g... No, that doesn't work, sorry. But the problem is, okay, let's go through that variation again. Rook e8, queen f3, d5. There's just rook e5, I think. Rook takes e5 wins, because after rook takes e5, queen f6, threatening the mate, threatening the rook, certainly threatening the mate. And if rook e1, you can simply play... Well, you could take it and go king h2, or you could go king h2 directly. And if black goes knight d7, you go queen d7 mate. So rook e8 probably doesn't work for that reason. So obviously when you're calculating, you're thinking that. So black decides, I'm going to give up the exchange. He plays a move d6. So this is the key moment. This is what really impressed me about the game. Because when I was reading about this in the British Chess magazine, someone was clearly observing this game while it was taking place. Or possibly it was on video as well. A lot of this stuff, there is some old video footage of some of these, quite a lot of the video footage of some of these old PTA. There's a very famous one where Kasparov, he'd often do well against that of Vichy actually, but there was one match where he lost and he blundered his queen and he just suddenly goes like this, and it's just like the funniest reaction ever. And it's typical sort of Kasparov, very theatrical. You know, Nakamura tends to do that a lot. I think Nakamura looks up to Gary in a way. But this position, white to play and win. You know, leave your comments down below, assuming I am hiding moves. But this is a position where white, Vichy, as I said, quick as a flash in the BTM, he played the move bishop d2. So why is that so strong? Well, first he attacks the queen. This is a beautiful idea. You first play this. He understood that he's going to go d6 because it's the only way to try and play for compensation. Because if you take the rook, I take back, and then if queen f3, well, I guess I can go bishop. Well, I mean, probably, to be honest, that's also quite good, isn't it? I mean, it still looks very bad for black. Maybe it's f5, maybe f6, you can kind of hang on a little bit. It still looks very, very bad, it must be admitted. But there's something even stronger, which is this move bishop d2. Because now the queen is stuck. So it's pretty much a dead lost position. He went queen c5, rook c1, queen c1, bishop takes c1, bishop d7, and then queen f3. So to me, Anand is the greatest Indian player of all time. I wouldn't go as far as to say he's the greatest player of all time. But for me, growing up, he was like the player that inspired me the most, because I really kind of empathized with, or, you know, had a connection. I felt, not that I was on the same level, but just the way that he would win games. It was very tactical, it was very clean, it was like beautiful positional games, and there was always like a beautiful tactic at the end. Now, there was a good anecdote that I read that apparently around about this period, he was training a lot with computers. So he played loads and loads of games because he was friends with Frederick Friedel, and they had Chess Space, and they had like an early version of Fritz. So he played like hundreds of games, thousands of games against Fritz. And by osmosis, his tactics got really amazing. Now, his tactics were already, he obviously had a huge amount of natural talent, and he worked hard on chess from a young age, but then he's also getting this Fritz. So this Fritz is sinking in. It's kind of what happened with me, but on a lower level, because, you know, I partly had a breakthrough through training a lot against computers, and I started to see tactics, you know, being started to visualise. But yeah, Vichy Anand, in my opinion, is a bit of a genius. And yes, he inspired a huge generation of Indian players, but I think he inspired a lot of people even beyond India. just with the way that he plays and continues to play to this day. You know, I don't think he's quite the player he was. Don't get me wrong. He's not as exciting a player as he was when he was younger. That's natural. It's a little bit like what happened with Tao. Tao, when he was younger, was a very naturally a brilliant attacking player. I don't think the same with Anand, but not quite on the same level now. It's more about results orientated and just relying on that experience and that natural ability, and still very strong. But some of his early games were so inspiring for me as a professional. So again, leave your comments down below. Do you agree with me? Is there a player that particularly inspired you? I would say that Vishy Anand was probably the player that inspired me the most when I was growing up. Great name as well, isn't it? Viswanathan Anand. One of the things that's not known about him very widely is that I think he partly got good at chess because his dad, obviously India didn't have a great history of producing great chess players. I think Sultan Khan was potentially from India, and then it was sort of like came to England. Anand also played the British Championships in the early part of his career, and he played at Oakham Young Masters. But Anand's father worked for Indian Railways, and they were basically sent out to Philippines to maybe help over there with the railways over there. And when he was living in the Philippines, he went to Baguio City a few months after the Karpov-Korchnoi match. That would have been 1978. So at that time, Anand would have been about, I believe he was born something like late 60s, right? Maybe born 69, so he'd have been about 9 at the time. But that he said, I remember reading, listening to an interview, video on YouTube, and I remember him saying that inspired him a lot. So there's a big chess connection with the Philippines. Bobby Fischer went out there. Obviously Campomanes was the president of the FIDE for many years. He was also a chess player himself. Bobby Fischer was also spent some time in the Philippines and Karpov as well, because there was some kind of rumours that what was his name again? The guy who was president, not Cory Aquino, the guy before that. They were gonna arrange a match. Anyway, that was my interesting comment about. Please leave your comments down below. Are there any players that inspired you when you were younger? This was a game in particular that inspired me. I love this idea of the switchback with the bishop coming back to d6. It just really appealed to me, the idea that you induce that move and then you switch back. A lot of players would have just gone for bishop d2 immediately, but then the queen would come back to c5, rook c1 has got squares like e7 or d6. Anyway, thanks for watching.